Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the July 14th, 2003 meeting of the Haltom City Council. Welcome to all of you who are here in the council chamber, as well as those who are watching either the live telecast or a delayed rebroadcast of this council meeting. I'll ask you, if you will, to arise at this time for the invocation and pledge of allegiance led by Mayor Pro Tem Bob Hurley.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for your many blessings. We thank you for this day and for all of those people here tonight. We pray that you'll give the council guidance and wisdom in all their actions and decisions, that it might be for the best of the citizens of Haltom City. All this we ask in your name. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item on the agenda tonight is a presentation regarding funding for the Central Fire Station Monument with the Fire Services Board, Mr. Warren Davenport. Mr. Davenport.
I'm Warren Davenport. I'm with the Fire Services Board of Haltom City Fire Department, and I just want to bring you up to an update on the funding. We have already collected 1/3 of the amount that it's going to cost us, and right now, I don't know what's on your monitor, but the citizens of Haltom City, I've had several of them asking how they could donate to this, and there's a little thing going out on HCTV to tell them how they can donate, where to send it to. I don't know, there should be a picture of the new fire station. Somebody asked me what that building was that they was building on Broadway. I said, that's a new fire station. They said, well, we didn't even know we were going to have a new fire station. So this will bring up the people out there to date on what's going on, and that is all I have to say. I'm just going to let you know that we have 1/3 of the money we need.
And so, that's wonderful.
Good job.
We appreciate the work that you and the other members of the Fire Services Board are doing in recruiting the money for that. And you may have said a moment ago, and I was busy looking at some of the mechanics of the meeting, you have collected about 1/3, which
1/3.
The total amount you need, you're needing to collect is how much?
$25,000.
So we're about 8,000, 8 or 9,000.
A little over 8,000 already collected.
Wonderful. This is a very worthwhile project, and we appreciate that. Members of the council, any comments or questions for Mr. Davenport?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you're following along, we come now to the consent agenda, and consent agenda items are deemed to be pretty self-explanatory, and they'll be enacted by the council with one motion. We are removing item number 6, item number 11 from the consent agenda, and we're adding item number 18. So please make note of that. And that having been said, members of the council, I'm ready for a motion regarding the consent agenda. Councilmember Branson?
I move that we approve the consent agenda, but I believe there were some changes made to the minutes at the from the last meeting, so with those changes incorporated into these minutes.
Okay. So the motion is to approve, reflecting the changes to the minutes. Do I have a second? Councilmember Hurley.
I'll second.
Councilmember Williams.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, that is with adding 18 to the consent agenda and removing item number 6. Is that right?
That's correct. 6, 11 are removed and adding number 18. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. If you will, register your vote. And that passes by unanimous vote of the quorum present. We come now to the Visitor Citizens Forum, and Ms. Staub, do we have, okay. This time is set aside for any person having business before the council that is not scheduled on the agenda to have an opportunity to speak to the council. Comments are to be directed toward the presiding officer rather than individual council members. Each speaker must limit his or her comments to the subject matter listed on the speaker's request form and must refrain from personal attacks toward any individual. A 5-minute time limit will be granted, and we have only one tonight? Okay, we have one request to appear under the Citizens Forum, Mr. Don Arp. Mr. Arp, if you'll come forward, give us your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes. And I believe the subject you had listed on your appearance card has to do with budget.
Oh, yes, that's correct. My name is Don Arp. I live at 3225 Harris Lane. And basically, I just came just to kind of give a little pep talk to the council. I know you're working on the budget now. Of course, you know you got a tough time right now because you had Winn-Dixie pulled out. You don't have the sales tax from that. You had Kmart pulled out. You don't have the sales taxes from that. And also, you know, things have slowed down. The economy's slowed down. So I just want to give you a pep talk. Since the economy's slowed down, some of the things that we've been wanting to do here in the city may need to slow down a little bit to kind of keep pace with it. So I just want to kind of give you a little pep talk about that, because you got some tough decisions to make over the next few weeks. And the other thing I was going to say is that sometimes in the past, of course I was a past council member, sometimes when there's committees set up, council members or ex-mayors or whatever get excluded from doing different things. And I would like for y'all to consider us as citizens. We have no voting power other than one vote out of 30-some-odd thousand when it comes to voting in the city. And I would like for y'all to consider us whenever it comes to being on any kind of committee. But again, I want to commend y'all on the work you've been doing, and I applaud you for the things you got to do, and you got some tough decisions to make. So I don't need 5 minutes. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Arp. We appreciate your comments and your words of encouragement. There being no further individuals who have requested to speak in the Visitor Citizens Forum, we move now to the announcements and events. And Councilmember Williams, I believe you have some announcements to make.
Yes, tumbleweeds. We don't have a lot in Haltom City, but Thursday evening we're going to have some at 7:30 p.m., July the 17th. Haltom City Concerts in the Park presents Texas Tumbleweeds. Bring your own picnic and your lawn chairs, relax, and enjoy the free concert, the final one of the season. That'll be at the Haltom Road Park at 3113 Haltom Road. That's just south of Broadway here. If y'all haven't been to Broadway, Haltom Road Park, it'll give you a perfect opportunity to go down and check the park out. Bring you picnic items, something to drink. Coca-Cola is a nice tea, preferably. And also, there's a walking track down there. If you eat too much while you're listening to the band, you can walk around the track. It's very nice still. So it'll be Thursday afternoon, 7:30 p.m., July 17th.
Anything further?
That's all I have.
Mr. Torres, I believe you have an announcement or two.
I would like to announce tonight that a little earlier this evening, staff presented to the City Council our preliminary annual budget document for next year. It's been a real challenging last few months as staff's been putting this thing together with some of the dilemma that we're dealing with that Mr. Arp mentioned earlier about the declining revenues to the city. But nevertheless, we've presented this budget to the council. It's a very, very large, complicated document. You'll see a lot of these floating around the room here tonight. Even the directors received their copy as well. But we're going to start our preliminary, our hearings, our workshop hearings on this document this Thursday night at 6 o'clock in the library. Will be the first of several meetings, and they are public meetings. Even though they're being held over there, they are public meetings. So if anybody would like to sit in and attend and watch, we'd like that. Also, copies of the document are on file, or will be on file in the morning in the office of the city secretary, as well as at the library. If anybody would like to receive a copy of the entire document or any portion of it you might be interested in. we look forward to getting this process underway and making some of the real hard decisions that we're going to be faced with. It will truly be one of the most challenging processes I think I've ever had to go through, and probably for the rest of us. So we look forward to getting underway with that. That's all my announcement.
Other announcements or events need to be brought to the attention of the public at this time. Okay, we move to item number 14. This is a public hearing. Councilmember Fowler has an interest in this particular item. He has signed a conflict of interest affidavit and is recusing himself from the process on this particular item. Mr. Pliska?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, citizens of Haltom City. This item is Z005-03 to conduct a public hearing and consider the application of Mr. Trey Fowler for a zoning change request from the C3 Commercial District to the M2 Heavy Industrial District on Lot 6, Block 2, Parkdale Gardens Edition, located on the east side of Moneta Street, containing approximately .376 acres of land, locally known as 2416 Moneta. Accompanying ordinance is Ordinance O 2003-016-15. Consideration and/or action regarding the approval of an ordinance amending Ordinance O 2002-03215, as amended, the comprehensive zoning ordinance of the City of Haltom City, Texas, for a zoning change from the C3 Commercial District to the M2 Heavy Industrial District on Lot 6, Block 2, Parkdale Gardens Edition, containing approximately .376 acres of land located on the east side of Moneta Street, and this is the first reading. The applicant is requesting a zoning change in order to develop the site for a construction contractor's office. This will also incorporate lots 6 through 9 for this facility. I list for you the existing zoning, which is C3, and the land use at this time would have been commercial. It is, however, vacant with a detached garage on the site. I list for you the adjacent zoning and land uses. Access to the property will be from Moneta. At this time, however, access is proposed on Midway for this property. The site is designated as industrial according to the city's comprehensive land use plan. Therefore, the requested rezoning would be in compliance with such plan. A legal notice regarding the public hearing was published in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram on June 13, 2003. Property owner notification for all properties within 200 feet of the site were mailed out on June 13th as well. 21 properties were notified. Staff received 0 in favor and 0 in opposition. I also formally attached to you zoning information and GIS aerial for your review. At their meeting on June 24, 2003, the P&Z Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of this zoning change request from the C3 Commercial District to the M2 Heavy Industrial District for case 005-03.
Members of the council, any questions for Mr. Pliska before I open the public hearing? Thank you, Mr. Pliska.
Thank you,
There
Mayor.
being none, I'll open the public hearing at this time. And since this is a public hearing, any member of the audience who wishes to speak either for or against this request for zoning change has the opportunity to do so at this time. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak on this subject? Mr. Eklund, if you will come to the podium, give us your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Ray Eklund. I live at 2532 Oakwood Terrace. I'm coming before the council tonight because I have financial interest within 200 feet of this property. I spoke to the owner this morning. I did not receive any notification from the city, but I was gone for 2 weeks, but I was here for the 2 weeks between June 15th and the 1st of the month, so I don't know where the notice was sent. But regardless of that, I spoke to him, and he laid out his plan and addressed my concerns. In our discussion this morning, he was going to leave the trees near Moneta Street. This is still a residential street. The city in its decision-making processes has decided that these homes should be industrial or commercial all the way down through there, and I don't agree with that. But his property, as we face it tonight, facing Midway would be properly a commercial or even a M2 kind of thing. This is heavy zoning against there's a house right behind his property, and there's residents directly across the street. So I don't know if we're able to keep the trees past his, once we zone it, you know, he may keep the trees and then he may sell it next month. So we can keep some buffer, which is a big discussion that we had when we did have land use planning meetings at the library about buffers between these kind of zoning areas. Okay. Currently, these are single-family houses. Actually, the property across the street is a duplex property, two-family property. So, I would like, if the council can, to try to put something in there that we can keep the trees and keep the buffer in there. His plan facing Midway seems to be a good plan and would have a least effect on the neighborhood, but it is in fact still a neighborhood. So,
Thank you, Mr. Eklund. Councilmember Williams?
Yes, I got a question for staff. I'm looking through, Tracy and I both, we're looking at our deal here. Our packet doesn't include a list of the property owners within 200 foot. Isn't that usually included in our packet?
It does, and I was surprised tonight that it was not in there. I do have the file, and I will check on that 200-foot notice.
Okay. Addressing Mr. Eklund's concerns there about the trees, would that be a problem, or is that something in zoning, or is that something?
We do not have a tree ordinance at this time, and during the development phase of this is, again, just a zoning issue and not a plan development, but a straight rezone. Anytime heavy industrial borders a residential district, which it does to the north, and he's referring to lot 4 on that, or 5, he would need to put in, the applicant would need to put in a 10-foot landscape buffer, or he could get credit for the additional trees if he chose to do so. But the ordinance calls for a 10-foot landscape buffer to separate the industrial properties from the residentially zoned properties, and this 10-foot buffer would incorporate a tree every 25 feet. Now, he would get credit, or if he chose to use the existing trees. I'm not that familiar with the property, and to see how many trees were on the northern end of the property.
Okay.
It was my understanding that, talking with the applicant, that he does not have plans to develop this lot at this time. He's just incorporating it into the construction development.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from the council? Mr. Torres, any comment? Okay. Members of the audience, anyone else wishing to speak either for or against this application? Mr. Arp, if you'll come forward, and if you will give us your name and address again for the record, we would appreciate it.
It's Don Arp, 3225 Harris Lane. I just have one question, and that is on the M2 industrial district, is that the most heavy industrial district we have? I know we have M1. Which one is the most?
That is the heaviest.
That's the heaviest. So M2 district could have anything go on it at all, right? You could put anything in there?
There are conditional uses as well in the heavy industrial district.
Oh, no,
That would take P&Z and council.
All right, but I thought it was just for a construction office. Is that what you said?
It is what is.
Gentlemen, if you will, for the benefit of not only our people here,
Right.
but the people on TV,
Right.
if you will,
Get
as
closer.
each of you speak, get close
Okay,
to the microphone.
all right. I thought it would pick me up, okay. I guess my question is on the M2 heavy industrial district, that's the heaviest that we have possible to have all kinds of different things in it. And I thought I had heard that they're going to put a construction office there. And I was wondering, is a construction office allowed in C3? And if it is, why do we need M2?
In answering this question, a construction office is actually allowed in C3 with inside storage. Now, if a construction office has outside storage, he would have to go to a heavier zoning. It's my understanding that there will be outside storage on this project.
Councilmember Williams?
For Mr. Paliska, you're talking about a permanent construction office now on-site
Correct. Yes, sir.
construction.
Right. It would be a business devoted to construction.
And on this M2 also, there can't be car lots or paint and body shops.
That is correct. That would take a conditional use permit in an industrial area.
So that takes the worst of them out. Yeah.
Anyone else in the audience wish to speak either for or against this application, this being a public hearing? Okay, there being none, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we move to the corresponding ordinance. Councilmember Hurley.
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance 02003-016-15.
Councilmember Henderson.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? There being none, if you'll register your vote, I will display it. And that passes, you got the numbers? Councilmember Fowler, we're complete, we've completed item number 14. If you are ready to rejoin us, we'll move forward to item number 15. Okay, item number 15, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Oh, in front of 15. Yes, please go ahead.
Don't have my packet here. Item number 11 is an ordinance or resolution which appoints the city council as the membership of the Crime Control and Prevention District. And the background on this for the council's information is that the statute that authorizes a Crime Control and Prevention District states that the city council shall appoint members to that district. A couple of years ago, the Attorney General issued an opinion that even though the statute doesn't precisely say that there are any limitations on the appointments, that it would be inappropriate for council members to appoint individual council members to that board. The legislature amended the statute to specifically provide that if the city council wishes to serve on the Crime Control and Prevention District, that the entire city council can be appointed as the membership of the Crime Control and Prevention District. The resolution before the council tonight accomplishes that. It will allow the city council to itself sit as the Crime Control and Prevention District because of the AG opinion, which says that you cannot appoint 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 individual council members to the board. And I think what we're seeing as a trend is that since this involves city sales tax monies, the city council feels it's important to retain control over the expenditures of those monies, and because the Attorney General will not authorize them to place individual members on the council, this resolution is before the council tonight to appoint the entire membership as the Crime Control and Prevention District.
So if the council so chose to take that route, it would disband the board as it's currently constructed, and the people who are currently serving on that would be removed. Is that correct? Okay. You've heard the explanation by the city attorney on the item before us. We do have an appearance before the city council. Mr. Don Arp, if you will, you've indicated you'd like to address this subject before the council takes action.
Okay, I'm still, well, do I need to give my name and everything again?
Please.
Don Arp, 3225 Harris Lane. I guess I'm still a little confused on this. I thought I had heard the attorney say that the city council can sit on the Crime Control Prevention District Board, but I didn't hear you say that they had to, so I was just wanted to ask a little more clarification on it. Are you saying that you can't have any council members on it, or you say it's got to be either all citizens or all city council? I'm a little confused on that, and I think the audience is too.
That's a good way to put it, Mr. Arp, that it's an either-or situation.
Okay.
According to the amendment to the statute, either the entire city council will serve as the board, or it will be a citizen board with no city council members.
Okay, then the question I have is no matter what the recommendation is by this board, does it still come before the city council to approve the budget that they come up with? Whoever needs to answer that.
The budget must be approved by the city council, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, and I know it's not on here, but on the economic district, is it going to fall into the same guidelines?
It does not.
Does not, okay. Okay, well, here's my recommendation. My recommendation is that since the city council has oversight over the budget anyway, I think it would be best if you had all 7 people be all citizens instead of the city council doing it. The reason being is I think it would look better for the citizens of the city to have the input on the crime control district. They're the people who are out there. They're the ones who want to see the money spent to take care of the things that are going on in their particular areas of the city. And I know that you're thinking about, you're probably in the neighborhood of $1 million. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's somewhere close to that. And I know you want to keep a tight rein on it, but you still get to look at the budget. You can still change it. I think you ought to let the citizens have a shot at it first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arp. No one else has filled out a card to address the council on this subject. We move forward now to council discussion and action. Councilmember Williams?
I didn't hear Mr. Arp use the word quandary. He uses that in his sentence, but I'm in a bit of quandary of this myself, because if the entire council sits on the crime control district and we come up with a solution and a proposal for the budget, what's the chances of that not passing when it comes before the council? Somewhere there's a moot point.
I've seen councils change their minds.
But that's, I don't always agree with Attorney General. I think y'all know that, and the council has, thank you. We agree on something. We agree on a lot of things, don't take me wrong. I haven't talked to anyone that serves on this crime control district concerning this. I had one phone call over the weekend, and when I called the gentleman back, he was busy at the time and couldn't speak with me about it. I'm sure that was a concern that he had. But we've had some members on there that's been on there for some time, and I know we've had some council members that served on there for some time, and I was on it 3 or 4 years ago, and it's time consuming. A lot of preparation goes in it. The police department puts a tremendous amount of time in it, and for the council to go in there and work on that, I haven't even talked to the chief of police concerned about this or not, but you're working with 7 council members and the mayor. I don't know if the mayor can be on it or not. Can the mayor be on it as well?
Yes, the mayor would be on it if you approve this resolution.
Okay. But it just looks to me like if you have all council members on there, if it was all, let me ask this to the city attorney, if it was all citizens and they brought us a proposal and we weren't in agreement with it, could we change it?
No. Basically, you have to reach an agreement on the budget.
In other words, if they brought us a deal, say they want to buy 10 squad cars and the council only wants to buy 7 squad cars.
The only option...
Is your microphone on?
I believe it is. You can't hear me?
Not very well.
The only option you have is to reject the budget. You can't change it. The crime board has to change the budget.
Do you send them back? Is that what you would do, send them back for, okay.
If I may, that point has been elaborated on in the past few years, ever since we've had the crime board. They have some rather stringent budget creation guidelines in their statutes that created the crime district entire organization. But yes, that is what council said is absolutely correct, and it's always been that way. When that budget is approved by the crime board, the council can only approve it or reject it. If they reject it and wish to amend it, then the council and if we have a complete citizen crime board have to meet together at some point in time and negotiate a resolution to that quandary.
And for clarification, that board is selected by the council members.
I believe that's correct, yes.
So those board members should share the views of that council member somewhat.
Oh, I don't know if I can comment on that at all. Sorry.
Anything further? Councilmember Sutton?
Thank you. We are in a bit of a quandary in that tomorrow night is the first meeting of this board, and we need to resolve this membership issue probably tonight. And my understanding, if this is correct, do we now have a full board, all the members that make up this board right now?
No?
Not of citizens? Okay.
Chief, do we have 1 or 2 vacancies?
Mr. Hurley, I've not been notified of any resignations. You would be the only council member remaining.
Mr. Markham.
Mr. Jennings and Mr. Markham, if they've
Jennings were
resigned,
both on the council, and they were members of the board as well as myself. After the election, they ceased to be a member.
well, actually, unless they've officially resigned, they haven't. Or unless a council member has officially taken them off that board, they haven't. They would still be active members.
They have officially resigned.
They have officially resigned, okay.
Absolutely, they have.
If they've officially resigned, then we have 2 vacancies, one for Mr. Markham and one for Mr. Jennings. And you would be the only sitting council member that is still on the board.
Okay. Councilmember Henderson?
If they've officially resigned, we haven't ratified those resignations.
They haven't come before the council.
Nope.
Mayor, if I might.
Yes.
have the
Councilmember
floor a
Hurley?
minute. I think there is no disrespect intended to the volunteers that serve on this board, and all of their help is appreciated. Tommy Sanders, my appointee, stand up. Okay. But they're very dedicated, and most of them serve on the Crime Control District Board and also on the Crime Prevention Board, which is 2 of them. It seems like, I wouldn't say it's a conflict, but it kind of spreads them thin. And I think the biggest function that this board does or accomplishes is the matter of a budget. All these items are brought to the board by the police department, and they're kind of sifted through to see what can be afforded. And it's more or less a budget preparation process because that's their only function they've got. And I believe the thinking was that the council is probably better prepared because we have to go through the budget anyway. And that would be my recommendation, that it simplifies the whole process. That's all I've got.
Is that in the form of a motion, Councilmember Hurley?
Yes, sir, it is.
We have a motion. Do I have a second? Councilmember Sutton?
That's for a second.
Have a motion and a second, and that motion is to make the composition of the Crime Prevention and Control Board members of the council. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Okay, there being none, if you'll register your vote. And we have a split vote, and the mayor gets to vote, and I vote in the affirmative. So the motion carries to make the council members of the Crime Prevention and Control Board. We move now to item number 15. Item number 15 is one I had placed on the agenda. And let me take just a few minutes to explain what I have in mind here. When I was sworn in a couple of months ago as mayor, I made a commitment to the council, to staff, and to the citizens that I would do my best as the presiding officer to improve how our council meetings are conducted. I promised to tighten up the focus of the council meetings, and I promised to try to raise the bar by chairing council meetings that flow efficiently and effectively. And I propose to do that by keeping discussion focused on the issue under consideration and by preventing discussion from rambling and repetition and otherwise belaboring the point. Tonight, what I'm bringing forward is in keeping with that commitment. I'm asking the council to approve a time limit of a total of 5 minutes for each council member, including the mayor, on each agenda item, allowing for discretion by the mayor or the council to extend that time to 7 minutes. Now, this 5-minute rule could be suspended for one or more agenda items as a council meeting unfolds, if the council so chose, upon the vote of 2/3 of the quorum present. A member wishing to yield his or her 5 minutes to another council member would, under this proposal, under this resolution, would be allowed to do so by motion and the vote of the majority of the quorum present. And what I've recommended in this resolution is that the city secretary would be the official timekeeper. Now, I know there are a lot of meetings that the council is involved in that's not your regular or special meetings of the council. It's workshops, and a 5-minute time limit would not be appropriate for one of those. Now, I believe that passage of this resolution I'm asking for tonight is in the best interest of the council. Number one, it's a win-win situation for everybody involved. Number two, it's fair. It's got checks and balances built in to prevent anybody from abusing the situation. Thirdly, I believe it's reasonable because we receive our council packets 4 to 5 days prior to council meetings, and that gives us plenty of time to be able to go over the material. In addition to that, we have access to the city manager's office to obtain clarity or to request additional information prior to the council meeting. Then we have, just before we come in here in open session, we have an hour of pre-council to review those issues, and by the time we get to the council meetings like we are here tonight, we ought to be ready, we ought to be prepared to take action within this proposed 5-minute limit. And I believe, number four, that adoption of this resolution formalizes the process, thereby minimizing awkwardness or misunderstanding, as well as encouraging greater meeting effectiveness and efficiency. Now, I wanted to make it perfectly clear that what I'm proposing is not to discourage public debate on issues that come before us. We must have public debate. We must take whatever time is necessary to have open exchanges as we deliberate so we can make responsible decisions. But what I am proposing is that this, if the council sees fit to adopt this resolution, this gives me, as the presiding officer, a vehicle in hand to help us stay focused, to help us not to waste a lot of people's time, to allow us to be more productive and efficient. And I believe that the passage of this resolution and the adherence to this resolution is a positive step in the right direction for this council. I had an opportunity to talk with my colleagues, mayors in some of the cities roundabout. The council meetings in Watauga and Richland Hills typically, once they come in open session like we are here, last an hour. In North Richland Hills, hour and a half is their normal time for conducting council meetings once they come out into open session. And of course, there are always situations that extend that time beyond the normal. And they go through the same process we do in order to do that. So what I'm proposing tonight is that we give consideration to this resolution as a way of cutting down. Our council meetings have been lasting 3 to 4 hours, and we can be much more efficient, not waste a lot of time, and still be effective in the discussions and in the process we have. So with that being said, in way of introduction, I'm ready now for comments from the council, and then we'll move on to take action on this. Councilmember Fowler, you have your light on, and then Councilmember Williams.
Mr. Mayor, I have to respectfully disagree with you. I've served on this council for starting 7 years, and I don't feel like that anything that's been done in the 7-year period that I've been a part of, or in the interim that I was not on this council, was done as a waste of time. I do it in respect, but I don't feel like that we should take any issue and shortchange it. And if it requires discussion, I feel like that's our position. We signed on to be members on this city council when we put our name in the hat to run for office, and I feel like that if a citizen has anything that they'd like to speak about, then You know, I feel like that we need to sit up here listen, and if we have comment and debate, I feel like that we don't need to be limited to having the opportunity to come before a 2/3 vote and decide whether one council member's position is valid or not, or whether their comments are a waste of the other's time. I respect all my colleagues on this council, and anything they have to say, I feel like that, you know, I'm going to sit here and do it. I feel like that you as mayor have the opportunity, or have the, you know, with the gavel, the ability to make sure that these meetings stay focused and things are germane to the subject at hand. In saying that, like I say, I respectfully disagree with you on this. I feel like that, yes, meetings have been lasting a little bit longer, but we've had a lot on our plate. You know, there's been a lot of issues at hand at this city. When you go on national TV, you have a lot of things, and your community as small as we are, there's a lot of things that we have to discuss and work out. So, in saying that, I just hope that, you know, you'll consider mine as from a respectful standpoint, that I just disagree with the with limiting council members to a 5-minute time frame.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Fowler. Councilmember Williams, and then we have a citizen who wishes to speak on this subject.
Okay, thank you. This doesn't come as a surprise to me. I get an email from a former mayor right after the last council meeting. I'm sure he's looking in tonight in the family, and hello to y'all. It says, as a council member has a problem, who speaks too long and too often at every meeting. Everybody knows exactly who it is, except he. I know who it is. It's me. And I knew it before I got that letter. And I talk far more than any person on this panel does. Whether I be up here on this panel, whether I be on the line of business, whether I be in my Sunday school class, or where I am, I mouth off more than anybody. And I get more response, I think, than anybody does. I'm amazed that we're discussing the length of time that's allotted for speaking on agenda items. For one, if we're going to do our number system, I didn't number mine, but I'll just go ahead and put 1 out there. We're wasting time right now discussing it. That lays in the hand of the gavel. If the person presiding over the meeting thinks that we're dragging out, he has the opportunity to hit that gavel. He has the opportunity. Mayor Watkins, numerous times, I can't think of the nice word to use, but she infuriated me when she shut me up over here, but she knew how to do it. I'd sit over here like a little puppet and pout, and cry, but I got over it. Thorough discussion often ends in productive stuff. Hasty discussion often ends in hasty decisions. As I look back through the years, Daisy Lane, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, it even went into the months that we discussed it. But we went from a dirt path between 2 sections of houses to a sidewalk with a park-like area in between. It might not have been what everybody wanted, but it is a plus to our city. People on Saucer Drive had water running through their house for years. Lengthy discussion and help of volunteers got that stopped, and I don't think water's been back in their house since we did that. Neighbors on Starlight Drive came up here for 2 or 3 meetings. Our city engineer took lots of time working with them. They were wanting speed humps. We didn't put speed humps, we put a stop sign. And I think the city can probably say we never had another complaint off Starlight Drive about speeders since we installed the stop sign. Homeowners might still be having to pay for curbs and gutters on replacements of property that belongs to the city. When those curbs and gutters were put in by the developer, they were dedicated to the city, and for a long length of time, these citizens were having to pay when they replaced the curbs and gutters that actually belonged to the citizens. Lengthy discussion. The Haltom swamp might still be full of water if we hadn't had lengthy discussions. The mayor said he changed his style of running during his second term, and the 2 junior council members said that they were going to bring a change to Haltom City. Speaker cards in the mid-90s were altered to limit people on the time that they could speak. Being elected in 1998, these speaker cards have dwindled a great bit since I've been here. Most are just involved with personal attacks now. Those wishing to address the council before either calling my office, calling my house, or coming by and see me. Many of these problems are being solved without ever getting to a council meeting. 2001, when the mayor was elected, he came by my office 2 or 3 times a week for quite a while. I feel like once he got comfortable on how to run the meeting, I haven't seen him back in my office. That's been about 1.5 years. I've got 3 phone lines, 2 fax numbers, a pager, 3 emails. I'm in the city hall 2 or 3 times a week. This is the first that I have publicly heard about this. And why bring it out in a public meeting? Why not pick up the phone and say, John, you're running them too long. Can you slow them down? Why, bring the entire city in on this? The only council member I've heard complain is Mrs. Bransom. She says she's in a hurry to go home. She gets up and early, and I feel for her for like that. But, if these meetings are running too long and too late at night, we could move these meetings to daytime. I wouldn't have a problem meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning. That way all the staff's already here. In my opinion, you say 5 minutes to 7 minutes. 5 minutes if it's a regular deal, or you have the rule to extend it on to 7 minutes. Robert's Rule of Order, which we don't go there. Former mayor said Robert doesn't live here and Robert doesn't vote, but the rule of thumb on that is each panel member gets 10 minutes to discuss an item. And then after the item's discussed, that panel member also obtains 10 minutes for rebuttal. If you're going to limit it to 5 minutes, why vote to change it on some items and not for others? When I sit up here and make decisions, these aren't all numbers to me. These aren't all games. It's not a hobby. I've got 270 some odd people. Not only do I look after the city that they work for, but I look for their well-being, and I'm not going to sit up here and limit myself to 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes time for voting on and stuff and discussing. I didn't know what time I started. I'm probably in about 7 minutes of what I said right now, and if I needed 15 or 20, I'd take it. But also, Mayor, if you'd like to at any time, you can say, John, bring it to an end. We need to close it. So my closure is, I don't see a problem with the way it's been. The city had 50-year birthday a couple of years ago. They've been running this way for 50 years. I don't mind change, but I don't want to expedite it. Now, if you want to make all these deals out, and we'll make everything out in the pre-council and get our vote, and we'll just come out here and you can read it after pre-council. We can get these meetings out in about 10 or 15 minutes. But I don't think that's the right way to run the city. My vote will be against it.
Okay, Mr. Arp, I believe you have, okay. Used Don's time. Okay, we have had the presentation by myself giving the rationale of what I had in mind with bringing this forward, and we've had comments from a couple of members of the council. I'm in line for a motion if there's no further discussion. Councilmember Bransom.
I move that we accept your proposal as stated.
Okay, I have a motion for approval of the resolution as presented in the packet. Is there a second? Councilmember Fowler.
I'm sorry, the light wasn't on. I move for denial of this item.
Okay, we failed to get a second a moment ago. We have a new motion on the floor. We have a motion to deny and to leave things in effect the way they've been going. Do I have a second on that motion? Councilmember Williams?
I'd like to make a substitute motion. We move on to item number 6.
Make a substitute motion on Trey's motion. Okay. First of all, do we have a second to the motion that Trey made? Okay. There being none, it dies for lack of a second. Councilmember Williams?
My motion is that we move on to item number 6 in saving time.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I make a motion that we move on to item number 6 and leave this as
Okay.
no action.
We have a motion to move on from this item. Do I have a second? Councilmember Sutton?
Point of order, we don't need a motion to move on with the agenda, do we, Mayor? No, point of order, we don't need a motion to just continue on with the agenda. We can just do that, I think.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. All right, that being said, item number 15 is an issue that has been dealt with by the council at this time. We move now to item number 6 on the agenda. Councilmember Williams?
For clarification, what are we doing? Are we going to say that we're going to table this for no action, or what are we going to do?
The council, if I understand correctly, what has happened, took no action. So
Okay.
that's the end of the subject,
Okay.
I would assume. Item number 6 is coming up for us at this point. Councilmember Williams, I believe you asked for this item to be
Thank you, Mayor.
to be placed after item number 15. You want to enter?
Yes, sir. Item number 6 was on a reading for time limits allotted for speakers. I noticed in there you can speak. I've already threw mine up in the stand, but I think you can speak for 5 minutes as an individual, 3 to 5 minutes, 3 to 6 minutes, something like that. And if you're speaking for a group of 10 or more, you can speak for 5 minutes. Is that? Am I?
5 minutes.
Can y'all clarify that for me? If you're an individual and you're speaking on something, you can speak 3 to.
5 minutes.
Limited to 5 minutes.
If you're an individual and you're speaking, you can speak for 5 minutes.
Correct.
But if you're an individual and you're speaking for a group of 10 or more, you can speak for 5 minutes.
That's what it says.
Can, why, can somebody explain that to me?
I'm not sure I can, and it's subject to change. If y'all are not comfortable with that group being limited to 5 minutes, I think that can be.
I think on a group of 10 or more, you know, if they want to elect a spokesman, I think you ought to let them have 7 to 8 minutes, something like that, because in essence, the time for 10 people to get up and speak 5 minutes, that's 50 minutes. And I really hate to even limit them to anything. Same thing with the gavel. Mr. Art proved it a while ago. He got up and he spoke for less than 5 minutes. If he had rambled on like I did in my statement a few minutes ago, I think the mayor has the right with the gavel to just tell him to bring it to the close. You know, I've been to the school board a few times, and they had the red light, yellow light, and green light system. And you had the green light. When the light turned amber, if you were talking about something, you'd forget all it, and the only thing you'd think about is looking at that light, see when it's going to turn red. I think if somebody's got something important enough to bring to the council, they elected us, we should sit and listen to them. And if the mayor or whoever's presiding over the meeting at that time feels like they're going in circles or wasting their time, he at that time could move forward. I know that this complaint I got on the email complained that we were needed to clean our own house up before we start cleaning up the citizens. I would just like to put like in a timely manner, 5 minutes for a person, and I think if they want to go more than 5 minutes, I think discretion. If there's a council member up here who wants to hear them out, I think that council member should have the right to hear someone out. And I also think that the mayor should have the right at some time during that to have them bring closure on it. They shouldn't be able to go up here and filibuster and read a phone book, but they should be able to take care of their business.
Okay, further comments, Councilmember
No.
Williams? Councilmember Hurley?
Councilmember Williams, I'm not disagreeing with you, but if you, in subsection D, presentation by citizens shall be limited to 5 minutes, allowing discretion by the mayor or council to reasonably extend those limits. Presentations by a representative of an organized group consisting of a minimum of 10 persons, which is present in the council chambers and has selected a spokesperson, shall be limited to 5 minutes, allowing discretion by the mayor or council to reasonably extend those limits. Would this meet the criteria you're talking about?
Yes, council member, it's about the same thing though. 6-1 has,
Things you're saying, and this,
right.
This gives you the latitude of extending it where it justifies.
Right. Would the council entertain moving that to like 7 minutes for a person speaking for a group of 10 or more?
That's fine with me. I can go for it.
I'd like to make a motion, we make that one change and then go to 7 minutes for a group of 10 or more.
If we could, we have a couple of citizens who wish to speak on this.
That's quite all right, yes.
We'll take a motion. Councilmember Fowler, you have your light on.
Yes, sir.
We'll call on the two citizens.
One quick question for the attorney for clarification. Last sentence, subsection D, where it says by the mayor or council to reasonably extend those limits. When it says council, what does that, what would that mean? Would it mean one council member asked for an extension, or would that mean a simple majority vote of the council?
That would be a majority vote of the council. The
Simple
mayor is the
majority?
I read this to say that if you adopt a 5-minute time limit on a speaker presentation, that if the speaker runs over, the mayor as the presiding officer can reasonably grant an extension of time. If the mayor feels it's inappropriate, of course the city council as a body can make a motion and can grant an extension of time, but it would take a vote of the entire council if the mayor was not inclined to grant the extension of time.
Okay, thank you.
Our first individual who has requested to speak to the council on this item is Mr. Ray Eklund. Mr. Eklund, if you'll come forward at this time, give us your name and address again for the record, please.
My name is Ray Eklund. I live at 2532 Oakwood Terrace. I appreciate the fact that we're able to come before the council. We've talked a couple times up here about this issue. I think it's important that we all know where we stand. I've stood in the same place, sometimes in opposition of the people holding the gavel, and they put the gavel on me, and they shouldn't have. They didn't let us finish our discussion. It was an important matter, and it was many, many years ago. So I think by this rule that y'all are looking at now, that will allow at least 5 minutes, would give everybody a chance, to at least get that information out there. I have had the opportunity, along with other citizens, to come down before the council. We've shown slideshows about the street conditions. We've had big, long discussions about the worst first street plan. You may remember those back in those days. We've had long discussions about the sexual oriented business ordinance that's going to be up for discussion again tonight. So those things took a long time. Okay, there were large groups of people involved. Okay, and this ordinance will help us to understand our responsibilities and your responsibilities as well, so that we all have some right, limited 5 or 10 minutes maybe, to appear before our governing bodies and have our things heard. Again, I appreciate the opportunity. This is a very important issue for everybody, the right to come up and speak before the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eklund. Our second appearance before the council card has been signed by Mr. Don Arp. Mr. Arp, if you will, when you come to the podium, give us your name and address for the record, and then proceed, please.
Well, this may come as a surprise, but my name is Don Arp. I live at 3225 Harris Lane. But one of the things I was wanting to comment on this is I was wondering, well, before I say anything, what I wanted to say is that do you have to fill out a speaker's card if you want to speak on any of the items on the agenda? That's a question I have. Well, the reason I asked that is because you discussed item 11 a while ago, and you had some people in the crime control district sitting in the audience who would have liked to spoke on it, but they didn't know they could come talk because they hadn't filled out a card. Now, if you fill out a card, do you get to talk longer than if you didn't fill out a card? That's my question. whoever wants to answer it.
Yeah, that's a question, I think, for the attorney.
Under the policy that's the council's considering right now, Mr. Arp, the provision says that a speaker's request card must be filled out by the speaker for each item the speaker wishes to address. So yes, you do need to fill out a speaker's request card.
So,
Just as you've done tonight, if you wish to
Right.
appear at the Visitor Citizens Forum, you would fill out a speaker's request card and list the topic that you want to talk about, or if you want to talk about a specific agenda item, such as this one, you can just put the agenda item number down and we know the topic that you wish to address.
well, the reason I brought it up is because some of the people didn't want to talk on it to start with, but as the discussion went on, they would have liked to make a comment, but as it is right now, unless you fill out the card in advance, you can't speak before the council. I think you might want to reconsider that. In fact, you might want to table this and talk about this some, as a matter of fact. And that was one of the major things I was wanting to ask about on this ordinance. And another thing I wanted to comment on, you mentioned Robert's Rules of Order a few minutes ago. Everywhere I've ever been, you have a motion and a second, then you have discussion. If you want to cut down on your city council meetings, you might get a motion and a second first, then have your discussion. If it dies for lack of a second, you can suspend all the discussions. So there's a way to shorten it.
Thank you, Mr. Arp. Councilmember Williams?
Mr. Arp, sir? Mr. Arp brings up a good point. I know in like P&Z meetings and zoning board of adjustment meetings, those chairmen that preside over that, they ask if anyone's there to speak for, and is anybody there to speak against. Now, I think on a public hearing like the announcement we had for item 14 a while ago, that would have been a good time to use that if someone here to speak for, someone against. Now, I know we have a standing rule that I think if you don't turn the speaker's card in by the time the meeting starts, then you're not allowed to speak, turn one in. Isn't that right?
I think that's a very good way of putting it. It's a standing rule that is not covered by this ordinance in front of you tonight. There's no requirement that the form be filled out prior to the meeting.
I remember when that came up because we had a heated meeting one night and cards started flying in from everywhere. And so that's the reason they started to set the rule that you couldn't speak on one once the meeting started. But I know what Mr. Eklund does for a living, but some of these other people that come and speak, some of their jobs won't allow them to be here at 7:30, and there may be an agenda item come up, like it's 8:45 now. If they were going to speak on this and they got here late, then they wouldn't be afforded the chance to do that. So I can see merit in what Mr. Arp says, but I can also see in keeping order on having an agenda item. I think on a public hearing, I think anybody should be able to come up and speak. And then on the other business, I think if they want to speak on the other business, I think a speaker's card would be a good tool.
Councilmember Henderson?
Mayor, we in line for a motion?
We're ready.
I move we table this item until we can work out some of the problems that we have being discussed up here tonight.
Okay, we have a motion to table. Do I have a second? Councilmember Sutton?
I'll second that motion.
Have a motion and a second to table this item. Item number 6, any discussion on the motion? There being none, if you'll register your vote. Okay. We move now to item number 16. Mr. Elfrink, I believe you're going to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Elfrink, before you start, it might behoove us, since this item may generate quite a bit of discussion, if we took a 5-minute break. If that won't bother you,
Sure.
I think we'll take.
I'll just speak while you're
We'll
all
take
gone.
10. We'll take 10-minute break.
That's right. Something like that. Or even better. It's a drop in the bucket. It's almost a
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are called back into open session. We're ready now to move forward with item number 16. Mr. Pat Elfrink, our finance director, will introduce this subject matter, and then we'll move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some months ago, the city manager and myself brought to the council an issue of very great importance. We asked the council to allow us to conduct a water and sewer rate study and to have it done by an outside consulting firm, one of which we happened to choose that had a very high reputation throughout the state. Those people, those professionals, excuse me, spent several months working closely with the staff, absorbing a great deal of data that we passed on to them. We had a number of meetings with staff where we very carefully examined and challenged the assumptions and aspects that they put into the water rate model that they were building. And as a result of a great deal of work by these experienced professionals working in correlation with our staff, 2 weeks ago at the last council meeting, we had a 1-hour special workshop where the results of that work was presented to the council in the form of this water and sewer rate analysis study with its recommendations. Throughout this process, we have tried to consistently apply the requirements that we must consider as we look at this rate study. Yourselves, I'm sure, realize it, but the public must also realize our water and sewer fund must be conducted and managed as a business, a for-profit type of business. For-profit because of the fact that it has future concerns to take care of, to fund. It has ongoing massive maintenance issues to deal with on a daily basis to ensure that our public has a clean, potable, safe, and 24-hour available water supply to them that is always there, can always be counted on. It's quite a business. The state requires that we operate this business in a for-profit manner and that we have revenues that are sufficient to pay the debt that we have incurred to operate this business. And throughout this study, some of the tenets that we have held ourselves very firmly to is our goal at the end of this study is to keep the rates as low as possible. To set these rates in such a manner that all customers, be they residential, commercial, or industrial, pay their fair share. To have adequate revenues to maintain this system, to have adequate revenues to pay for past and future major capital improvements, and to have adequate revenues to remain in compliance with the terms and conditions of the borrowing agreements that we signed when we borrowed millions of dollars from the state to repair some of the long neglected issues that we have throughout the city with regard to sewer infiltration and our water supply system. Again, this study was formally presented to the council at an hour-long workshop at the last council meeting. We have the recommendations here before you, which we have discussed. We have an ordinance here which will unfortunately raise the rates to a level that will allow us to maintain this system in a financially viable manner so that it can continue its responsibility of providing pure, clean water on a 24-hour basis for our citizens. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer them.
First of all, Mr. Torres, anything you want to add to what Mr. Elfrink has said?
I would like to add just a couple of items here, Mayor. This is for the benefit of the public. There was quite a bit of discussion previously at the pre-council meeting, and the city council was just earlier this evening given a copy of next year's proposed budget, so they really haven't had the opportunity yet to explore that and to spend a great deal of time discussing it. So in all fairness, I think the discussion for the water and sewer fund for next year is not going to come up until the budget workshop on the 22nd, a week from tomorrow night. The purpose tonight is to really just conduct potentially the first reading of the ordinance and solicit any kind of input from citizens about their comments or concerns or issues regarding this ordinance. So I don't know where this item's going to go. I know it will require a great deal of discussion and consideration before any kind of action comes, but we're not anticipating locking into anything this evening. Even if the council does approve the first reading of the ordinance, that by no means commits or obligates them to the passage of the second reading like it's proposed. So I'd just like to add that.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I have one more thing I would like to add that I left out of the study that I think is one of the most important pieces of information that's part of this study. At the very end of it, we have this rate comparison, a survey, Haltom City compared to 9 of our neighboring cities. At the present time, before changing these rates, we are well below the average water bill for a residential customer. After these rates are adjusted to compensate for increased expenditures, many of which we've had no control over, our average bill for a residential customer will still be below the average of these 10 cities. And that's a very important point to keep in mind. Thank you.
Councilmember Sutton?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to ask that we hear from citizens before the council speaks
Okay.
or discusses anything.
Yeah, that is appropriate. I thought you had a question for Mr. Elfrink. Members of the council, any questions for Mr. Elfrink before we get to the citizens? Okay, thank you, Mr. Elfrink. Mr. Ray Eklund, you have the first speaker's card on this subject.
Good evening. My name's Ray Eklund. I live at 2532 Oakwood Terrace, and I apologize for having to come up here so often, but we have a lot of agenda items that I enjoyed discussing with you tonight. So this particular item, and I spoke to Mr. Elfrink before I came up, so I can certainly shorten my comments based on his clarity, but we all understand the cost of goods go up, the cost of water goes up, and the other problems that y'all will be facing with that. My concern comes to do with the fees and the fines area that y'all will be discussing in the next few nights about this. In the back room, you said you collected $120,000 in penalty charges against citizens, and that your proposal would double that. That sounds to me like those are fixed costs. Those things didn't go up because Fort Worth raised the water rates. Those are things that we choose to raise the fines on. These fines, people are paying the fines, I think, for the water shutoff and those kinds of things, the service to turn it back on. Those are people that probably can't afford these kinds of fines and fees. Now, if you're getting your water turned off, you're in trouble. Right? When you're talking a $25 fee or a $50 fee, you're going to double it to $50. That's a lot of money to somebody that's making $6 an hour or less sometimes. And I think it's an unfair burden to those people. I think the city should reach out and try to figure out, should we do that to the citizens for $125,000 a year? The quote was made earlier. It's a drop in the bucket, $125,000. I think if we move the initial fee from $65 that it is now to $130, when you add that to somebody that's moving to our city, and you're bringing your family to Haltom City, and they're going to bring their paycheck to Haltom City, and now they're going to rent a house, and they got to pay first month's deposit, and then they got to pay the first month's rent, then they got to turn on the electric, and then they got to turn on the gas, and then they got to turn on a $130 fee for Haltom City to write down their name and collect the deposit. And I understand you need to protect your interests, but I would like for you to consider who's most adversely affected by that. Now, Mr. Elfrink tells me that some people are late all the time, okay, and they pay all the time. They have to pay to keep their water on. Well, maybe we should institute an escalating fee. The first time it's this rate, and if you start being habitual about it, then we want to get your attention. We need our money. That's another business. You're going to run it like a business. That's another way to run a business. So those are my concerns about this. The water fees will be what they are, but the fines and those kinds of things, and the policy of when we turn the people's water off and how we turn it off, I think the council needs to look at that. The stories I've heard are very unpleasant. They sound unfair. There may be individual cases, they may not be, I wasn't there, it may not be truthful, but I think we should be very careful about turning people's utilities off and how we go about doing that. So as you consider that, I would like for you to consider these fees and fines. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eklund. Our second speaker is, yes.
Pardon me, Mr. Mayor, I think I need to clarify something for Mr. Eklund. We are not raising the deposits. We are not raising any of the other turn-off fees or turn-on fees. The only penalty that's being changed in this ordinance that's in addition to the rates is the 5% penalty that's for a late fee. That's the only one. It's not the turn-on fee. It's not the deposit. I'm sorry if there was that misunderstanding. Okay, you're welcome.
Could you clarify the $130 fee?
That's a misunderstanding. It's not changing. And that's what I was trying to clarify.
Is that an accurate figure that's been
No, it's $65 is our deposit. $60 is our current deposit, and it's not being recommended to change. No.
Okay.
5% of the late, 5% of the past due bill. If you have a $100 water bill that's late, if you go past it, then the next month when you get your bill, $5 has been added on to it, and we're thinking about going to 10%. We're recommending because of a survey of other cities. We're way behind the game on that. We're way behind, and he is accurate. It is many of the same customers each month. Unfortunately, we send out 750 or so letters each month cautioning these people that they are within 10 days of being turned off, when then we give them a specific date and a specific time by which they need to come in and avoid being turned off and avoid the late charges. But it's just a recurring problem.
Okay, we have two lights on. Councilmember Fowler first, and then Councilmember Williams. We have one other citizen who wishes to address the council. Just Councilmember Fowler, is what you have something specific for?
Yeah, it's just for Mr. Elfrink, if I could.
Okay, yes, please.
Pat, you'd mentioned quickly, is it 2 years of good payment that you receive your
Exactly.
your water deposit
Yes,
back?
about 5 years ago, we began a policy of giving deposits back to customers who maintain a good payment record. If you go 2 years paying on time, we automatically send you your deposit back.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
indeed.
Just so people would be aware of it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Williams? Okay. Mr. Don Arp, if you would come forward at this time and you wish to address this matter.
I thought I'd give Greg and them a break. I didn't go back down that row this time. I'm Don Arp, 3225 Harris Lane. I'm still living there. Well, I've got several questions on here. The first thing I'd like to ask is, what is the rate proposal? I didn't hear that a while ago.
Mr. Torres, can you answer that, or Mr. Elfrink?
Pat, go ahead, read it out.
Did he say it?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, I got to read it. I don't have it memorized. I'm sorry. These are for the water rates and the sewer surcharge. Let's see. The residential minimum is going from $10.22 to $12 per month, and it includes the first 1,000 gallons. The per 1,000 gallon charge after that minimum is being recommended to increase from $2.65 per thousand to $3.23 per thousand. For commercial, single-metered commercial accounts, it's the same charges, same changes. Multi-unit commercial apartment residences, 5 or more living units served by 1 meter. The minimum charge is going from $9.20 to $10.80 per month. And if I might point out, that's 90% of the earlier rate that I mentioned. The cost per 1,000 gallons after that is the same change as I described earlier. We have a class called Special Multi-Unit, which includes motels, hotels, hospitals, and convalescent centers. Their monthly minimum for water is going from $2.55 to $3 per month. The charge per 1,000 gallons is the same as the earlier ones that I mentioned. That is the water rates. The sewer rates for residential single metered family is going from $6 per month on the minimum to $8 per month. The charge per 1,000 gallons of water that is treated is going from $1.03 per 1,000 to $1.79 per 1,000. The commercial water rates, single metered commercial, excuse me, has the same change on the minimum bill and on the per 1,000 gallons of water service, $1.79. I believe, yes, that's correct. Multi-units, I know you don't want to do the math. 90% is $5.40 is the present rate on the minimum. $7.20 is what we are going to on the minimum bill for a multi-unit commercial apartment residence. The per 1,000 gallons of sewer treatment is the same earlier mentioned. The special multi-unit rate for hotels, motels, hospitals, and convalescent homes, the per unit minimum is going from $1.49 per month to $2 per month. And that is basically the essence of these changes that are being recommended.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Arp?
Well, that answered part of one of them.
Okay.
Okay, my next question is, now that we know what the rates are going from and to, is what would be the pass-through as far as, well, I believe we have a contract with the city of Fort Worth for our water. What is the pass-through amount versus what the increase is going to be? And what I'm saying here is, how much has it actually gone up from the city of Fort Worth to us? And that's one of the questions I'd like to know. Is this a pass-through or is this an increase on top of that?
Pat, I think that's you, and you might want to stay over in that area. I think Mr. Art may have another question or two.
I need the exercise, Mayor. Thank you. The pass-through is something that has not been part of our policy really for the past 5 years. In 1999, when the water rates were last adjusted, the city manager at that time recommended to the council, and the council approved, removing the the so-called automatic pass-through charges from our ordinance. This ordinance puts that pass-through language back in on the advice of our consultants, and I think the council has been briefed on that a little bit because every year the city of Fort Worth, our supplier of water and our provider of sewage treatment, they do a study every single year to examine their cost of doing business. And then, unfortunately, at a very late date, I think it should be coming in very soon, in our budget process, they send us a letter that tells us what their rate increases are. And in some cases, it's a decrease, but usually one balances out the other, and it ends up being an increase. The study has not made any determination of the past 5 years as to what those cumulative or annual increases have been. We did not go in that direction. The study is, does take into account I think a 2.5% to 3% per year increase in the cost of our water supply and our sewer treatment. However, when our consultants inquired of the city of Fort Worth if they could obtain their long-range forecast as to what future rate increases might be that they were going to pass down to us, they refused to comply with that request. So I can't answer fully in any great detail what the future pass-throughs may be. It's what they determine it to be on an annual basis. We do have a member of our staff who is a member of the board that conducts this study. I believe that's our city engineer presently still. Is that correct, Greg? Or is it Public Works Director now? Public Works Director. These meetings are held at a facility of the city of Fort Worth. It's a representative of each of the, I think it's 22 contracting communities, but only they have a small group within that group that's part of the voting board and such. So we really don't have a lot of input into the process, but it's open on an annual basis. But their long-range forecast, they are not talking.
If I understood you, Mr. Elfrink, you said a moment ago that to answer Mr. Arp's question, over the last 5 years, how much increase has the city of Fort Worth passed on to us?
I would say it's in the average of, say, 1.5% to 3% per year in the
Okay,
past
and so
5 years.
over a 5-year period of time,
On average.
that would be how much?
I could not answer that accurately off the top of my head, Mayor. I don't have that number. That would require a considerable amount of research to try and determine what that cost was, and we have not done that as part of this study.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to challenge the city council to find out what the pass-through is. The reason I'm bringing this up is because some of the people that are having to pay for this, they also have to pay what's known as income taxes. And city taxes, we can take off of our income tax. Water rate increases, you cannot take off of your income tax. So if you're wanting to try to take your taxes off, that's the way to go if you're really trying to make up for some of the things you were talking about in the sewer, trying to fix things, because don't we build roads also out of this water and sewer monies?
We do not.
We do not, strictly infrastructure, okay. All righty, but all I was getting at is that if it's a straight pass-through, you know, I can kind of understand that. If we're trying to go up and above and beyond, because a lot of the people read the Star Telegram the same as I did, and it said that one of the reasons why we're going up is because people have been conservative and not spending as much money because they're not watering as much, so you're not making as much money. And like I just said, you can take taxes off your income tax, but you can't take water increases off. Another thing I'd like for you to consider is you've got new construction coming in throughout the city, so it's also generating new and more revenue. And the other thing I'd like to ask is the Public Works building, did that come out of the water and sewer monies, or did that come out of the bond package?
That the debt service on that new facility that's under construction is being paid for with bond revenue that is going to be paid back with water and sewer revenues. That's answer to your question.
Okay, well, you might consider in the future, rather than raising up our rates, to consider slowing down on some of the new construction within our own city. There's a lot of other buildings in the city that we could be using instead of building brand new ones. So that's something else you might want to consider. So whenever you consider all these things during your budget, I appreciate you thinking about some of the things that I brought to you today. Thank you.
Mr. Arp, if I could, a copy of the rate study could be made available to you if you're interested. It's got some of the, it touches on some of the questions that you asked, and you may.
I mainly was bringing up a lot of the questions so that the audience would know.
Right.
And also the people watching cable, which is what I normally do, but I had to come up here and talk to you on a few of these. So, thank you.
Councilmember Williams, you had your light on first, and then Councilmember Fowler.
Pat Elfrink, as he comes forward, don't try to take your taxes off your income tax. You'll be up there in front of them. You can't do it. Taxes or water rates, either one can't be deducted from income tax unless you're in business, and then you can take them off your expenses. Mr. Elfrink, you were speaking a while ago about what would you say the approximate number of turnoffs we have per month?
I would say they're in the neighborhood of 200 or 300. Is that correct, Chris? A month.
Can I get her to come up here?
Turn-offs or connect?
Turn-offs are done on a weekly basis, and we do about 50 a week on average. Although we skip a week at Christmas and Thanksgiving.
I'm going to directly ask her some stuff because that way we won't have
She would love
to.
to come up and answer your questions, I'm sure.
We've got the same hairdresser. Thanks, Miss Cerati. Have y'all ever done any kind of a study as to far as the group of people that you're turning off age-wise, or if this is the elderly or the low income, or just people that just don't take care of their business, or is there a way to know?
There's a lot of repeat offenders, people that are routinely on there, month after month. But we do not cut off senior citizens. We do a warning with them, and we work very diligently not to do that. But Yes, we do get to where we know the same people, and it does seem to be a certain group of people that are on the cutoff list very routinely.
Have we ever done anything to try to figure out why, or just is it just economics is bad, or just poor bookkeeping, or I'm not talking about poor bookkeeping on the other part, but people just not keeping up with their business?
There's a lot of different reasons. Everything that you stated is correct, but there are a majority of people who do live from paycheck to paycheck, and it's difficult for them to pay the bills.
Are any of these bills high enough? I couldn't even tell you how much my water bill is, but are any of these bills high enough that average, like the electric bill would average, would help these people?
Not really, because if it's a problem of a high bill, for example, like if it's a leak, then we work to put them on a payment plan. So basically, their water bills are level. They stay just about the same from
So we work
month
with
to
them.
month. Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. I also want to point out, for senior citizens, she mentioned that we do not cut them off. We also do not apply that penalty to them. There is no late charge for senior citizens. And also, in your last topic there, people who have trouble paying their water bill generally don't irrigate. They just let their grass die. And so averaging their bill would have no impact, because they're going to use about the same amount of water on a monthly basis for the things that you basically have to have water for: cooking, cleaning, and what have you.
So basically, this increase wouldn't affect them a whole lot as far as, because they're using probably close to the minimum.
I would say probably yes in most cases, unless sometimes we have someone, as she mentioned, with a leak, with bad plumbing. We try very hard to warn people and caution them, you need to look at your plumbing system, you need to fix it. And occasionally, well, they just ignore us for a long time, and then they get real upset because their water bill goes up dramatically.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Roddy. Thanks for coming out.
Councilmember Fowler, and then Councilmember Sutton.
I just had a question on a comment Mr. Arp had made, if he doesn't mind, on just for clarification on something, the road construction generating revenue. Is that what you said, Mr. Arp? I was just trying.
Mr. Arp, if you'll please come back up to the mic.
I just asked whether or not road construction came out of the water and sewer fund.
Well, no, I'd misunderstood you, and I thought you'd said that talking about generating revenue and.
No, what I said was all the new construction, like all the new apartment buildings, all the new housing and everything that's going in throughout the city is generating new revenue, because they're also using more water. So therefore, that's generating new revenue for the city.
Okay.
That's what I was getting at.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Sutton.
Thank you, Mayor. I read through the rate study, and Pat, you may want to be on hand here. Apparently, this study is still underway. Am I correct? It's not complete yet.
It is complete to the extent that during our budget review session, as the city manager alluded to, and between now and the next regular council meeting where we pass this ordinance on the second reading, we can still modify it. If certain parameters are requested to be modified. That is, in that manner, it's not complete.
Great, okay. In the study, it says that the city has experienced a 14 cents per 1,000 gallon increase since our last time that we increased the water rates here in Haltom City. So 14 cents per 1,000 gallon for the water, and for the sewer, it was 20 cents per 1,000 gallon.
Thank you for bringing that point up. That kind of helps answer an earlier question about how much has it gone up since 1999. But how many millions of dollars have we incurred in that? I don't know offhand.
Right.
I'd have to do some research on that.
And just to put this in perspective, it's 14 cents since 1999 and 20 cents, and we have not adjusted the rates here in Haltom City since 1999. But yet we've experienced these increases.
We have.
Okay, what we're proposing to change the rate to, just for a matter of perspective here, Fort Worth has raised 14 cents per 1,000 gallon. We're proposing a 58 cents
per 1,000 gallon, or 400% over what Fort Worth has raised. For the sewer, Fort Worth raised it 20 cents per 1,000 gallon. We're proposing a 76 cents per 1,000 gallon, which is a little over 300% increase. Now, what I understand is that we have a problem with our fund balances in the city, that they're not at what the ordinance calls them to be, the level, which is 20%. And they're currently at about 10.9%, something like that. And what this proposal would do is raise those fund balances to about 17%. Is that correct?
That's the forecasted estimate, correct?
Okay.
And
Okay.
also, if I may, in regard to the rate increases being more than the pass-through is not the only cost of providing service increase that we've had over the past 5 years. We have, on an annual basis, had increases in the cost of our staffing with regard to annual increases for merit increases and longevity. We've had increases every year of very considerable magnitude with regard to group health insurance, as we discussed earlier
Right.
today. The cost of electricity has gone up, the cost of replacement parts, the cost of concrete, the cost of pipe. All of those are in addition to the pass-through. This rate increase right now is not meant to solely recover the 5 years of pass-through that we have overlooked. There are a great many other cost factors in there that are part of the normal cost of doing business that probably correspond with the National Consumer Price Index that determine the rates that we're asking for at this time.
All right, so we haven't made an adjustment for the past several years, and
That's correct.
we need to start.
We've made no adjustment whatsoever.
Okay. Let me ask a question now. There are some assumptions in here that say that we want to bring our fund balances to a certain level. For instance, we could say, let's put those at a lower level or a higher level, or whatever we want to do. Those are the types of adjustments we can make in this study. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, let me ask this. If we were to make a motion tonight for this water rate increase, would that motion allow us to change the rates or the schedules or any other parameter of this water rate study? Or would we be locked into what this water rate study proposes?
Absolutely not. A motion tonight to approve the first reading does not commit you in any way to the fees that are recommended there. You can still modify them. Is that correct, Wayne?
That's correct.
Okay, so in essence, by making this motion tonight to go ahead and approve the reading of this ordinances, we are not necessarily raising the rates at this time.
No, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Yes.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Councilmember Henderson.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want a clarification from Councilmember Sutton. You had mentioned the sewer rates went up. What'd you mention the sewer rate? We were
20.
It went up 20 cents,
Well,
and you
it-
mentioned 70 sewer rates.
No, it went up 20 cents from Fort Worth, and we are raising it up 76 cents.
Okay. We're raising it 56 cents.
Or from $1.03 to $1.79.
Right. But we're passing on 20 cents,
Right.
so like the way you did on the water rate. So actually, we're only raising it 56 cents.
Right, we're raising it 56
Okay, that was
cents.
just a point of clarification.
And again, the main point I was trying to make in response is we are not raising these rates solely for the past 5 years of the cost increases of Fort Worth. It's also our cost of personnel, our cost of supplies, our cost of energy, concrete, every raw material that goes into this business.
I mean, and as you stated earlier, Mr. Elfrink, it's very difficult to do business for a long period of time if you're running in the red.
Absolutely.
And I think this fund right now is running in the red, and it needs to be on the other side of
one
the
thing
table.
to caution the council, or at least forewarn the council, if we are very, very conservative in what we do here and we pass a very, very minimal rate, then all that guarantees is that we will be back to you sooner, much sooner, than if we pass the rate that's recommended.
No further questions, Mayor.
Do you have a comment?
Well, just on kind of taking that and running with it a bit, this the planning study that you've been provided is a 5-year document. I don't really have expectations that it'll be 5 years before we'll need another study to recalculate and relook at our position. But I think this planning study should be good for at least 3 years. But nevertheless, it is a 5-year planning document, and its recommendation is that if we raise these rates to this level today, we should not have to raise rates again for 5 years.
That's what it's predicated on, correct?
Now, there are a lot of assumptions it makes, and a lot of things could change, but the assumption today is that this rate increase should be sufficient for, again, another 5 years.
And it takes into account, when you say not raise rates in 5 years, we have this pass-through language in here.
Pass-through,
You're right.
obviously.
Next year, if Fort Worth says, well, the cost of water is going to go up 2 cents per thousand, we hope that the council will follow through with that and give the city manager approval to pass that through, as the language states, so that we don't go through this really painful process any more often than we have to.
Councilmember Williams' light is on, and then Councilmember Sutton. When they're finished, I'll be ready for a motion.
Mr. Alfrank, let me tax your memory a minute. I looked through here, and I think Wayne and I were the only ones sitting on here in 1999. I do not remember since 1999 having a water rate come before us that we would either approve or turn down. Is that right?
The previous manager in 99, previous city manager, recommended to the council in 99, deleted that pass-through language. I know from my experience here in the 10 years that I've been here, just bringing forth a minimal increase that was strictly due to the pass-through of our costs from Fort Worth was sometimes a very difficult process, and didn't always work. It just didn't happen because it was politically unacceptable or what have you. There were obstacles in the way. And so it seems as though the language was simply not being used. It was serving no purpose, and he decided to take it out of the ordinance.
You being the finance director at that time, did you question him on that?
Oh, I'm sure I made some recommendations for and against having it in there. I mean, let's face it. Right now, it sounds good on paper, and it seems to be the prudent, business-like thing to do. But next year, if Fort Worth has a dramatic pass-through increase, and let's say our fund balances are setting at 17-point-something%. The council may be tempted at that time, for whatever reasons that may be very legitimate to them, they may be tempted to say, well, let's not pass it through this year. Or let's pass through just half of it. And that's sometimes the way the conversation went in years past when we had what was truly a pass-through cost. Gee, it's pretty easy to pass on it this year. We just won't do it. We'll wait till next year and see what happens.
Guess the point I'm making is, since '99, I haven't had the opportunity to either approve or deny a pass-through.
That is a true statement.
And I think what we should do in the future is make sure that we do have the opportunity each year to do that, to where we're not in this position again.
And this ordinance will give you that.
I think Mr. Torres is committed to bringing to the council the decision of whether or not to pass it through. One of the difficult issues is, again, it's the timing. We have not yet, on this date, received the notification as to what the changes will be from the city of Fort Worth. I don't believe we'll receive that until near the end of this month. And we're pretty far into our budget process at that time. But we can do it.
We need to learn from our mistakes.
But let's make sure we're all understanding each other. It's my assumption that if this ordinance proceeds, and next month Fort Worth puts us on notice that they're increasing by whatever amount, it's not my intention to come back to the council and recommend that we again pass that much pass-through. I'm thinking that these rates will be sufficient to cover any kind of current pass-through. I'm expecting they will. I'll be surprised if they do not. But it's going to be a very small piece. And these rates, I think, are sufficient to cover it. But next year, I think we'd be looking at pass-through again. I mean, they've got a record of of sending a rate increase every year. Is that?
Yes, every year they send it to us, and it's in three parts. It's the water rate, the sewer rate, and a surcharge rate.
I think it's very unlikely that we'll go a year and not receive some kind of rate increase from Fort Worth.
And the strange thing is, oftentimes, one rate will go up dramatically and the other one will go down. And I have no way of understanding it. It's
Yes.
They have their own team of
But these
professionals.
rates should sufficiently cover any kind of rate increase that Fort Worth is going to give us this year.
For this year, I would have to stand by that,
We've
yes.
not really discussed that before.
Even though these rates, because they're a little bit late in this fiscal year, these rates do not solve our funding and income problems by the end of this fiscal year. We will still not be in the good graces of those people from whom we've borrowed money, so to speak. But by the end of next year, we most definitely should be. The good fortune is we don't have to borrow any more money right now for some of the infrastructure projects that we have ongoing.
For at least a couple of years.
2 years.
2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Anything further, Councilmember Williams? Councilmember Sutton, and when Councilmember Sutton's finished, I'll be in line for motion regarding item number 16.
Yeah, just a clarification, Richard. I think that what we're saying here is that if Fort Worth does a pass-through increase, the way that this proposal is configured, it has enough additional revenue in it to cover those pass-through increases. But in the future, if it becomes necessary to raise, this council would not have to take action because of this ordinance. The city manager could effect that water rate increase. Is that true or false?
Is the pass-through automatic, or I would think it still should come back to the council?
I don't think any city manager would change the rates to their citizens without bringing it to the council for their
Pass-through language or not, I
concurrence.
think,
Yeah.
right.
So the pass-through language is not like it was before.
Oh, it's very, very similar to what it was before. It's almost verbatim. We tweaked it just a little bit at the recommendation of our consultants again.
Okay.
But it's simply meant to clearly define in English that what they tell us we must go up on is what we, the exact amount that they increase our rates, that's the amount that we will increase the rates to our customers.
Okay.
And we could probably include some minor language in here that such rate pass-through shall be brought before the city council for approval.
I'm sure we could.
So there's no doubt in anybody's mind that staff has the authority to just do it automatically. I don't think it should be done.
I don't think any staff in any city organization would just automatically, without the council's permission, raise rates whatsoever.
Right. Okay, and Councilmember Williams, you weren't saying that you weren't aware of these increases throughout the 5 years because the council every year has the opportunity to approve a budget which would look at these increases before they would decide what the budget. So you weren't saying that you weren't aware of these increases the last 5 years?
I didn't say I wasn't aware. I said I never had the opportunity to either vote for increasing them or decreasing them.
Okay.
And if I may also help respond to that.
Yeah.
I know that previous city managers, myself included as interim city manager, did not necessarily bring to the council the specific increases, the letter, for instance, and say, here's what Fort Worth is doing to us. I don't believe it was ever done in that minute detail. But I
Okay.
have a feeling this year when we get that letter, you guys are going to get a copy of it.
And just as a final clarification, the approval of this ordinance does not mean we are setting the rates right now.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm in line for motion regarding the first reading of ordinance 2003-013-03. What is the pleasure of the council regarding this item? Councilmember Henderson?
Mayor, move to approve ordinance number 02003-01303.
Okay, we have a motion to approve on first reading. Do we have a second? Councilmember Williams?
I've got a question. Mr. Sutton's got me wondering now, if we're voting to approve this and we really don't know what we're going to raise it to, we're just marking time. I would like to have something a little bit more, to make a motion to I guess I can't even put it in words.
Well, essentially, that's what any two reading process of an ordinance is doing. It just marks time. It basically sends a notice that there's an intent to do take some kind of action. And over the next few weeks, it will give anybody and everybody an opportunity to forward any comments you might have. I would also like to take these proposed rates and put them on the TV and let them run on there for a while. I mentioned in pre-council that on the 22nd in a workshop, we're going to be discussing in great detail the financial condition of the water and sewer fund. Again, that's just next week. That's certainly before the second reading can come up. At that workshop, conceivably, the council might instruct staff not to bring this item back for a second reading. Or you may say, bring it back. I mean, there's still a lot more discussion that needs to be done on this.
Clarification for Wayne. If we decide at the budget deal that we don't want to bring this back for a second reading, do you put it back on the agenda to deny it for a second reading, or?
That's one option.
Y'all got me confused.
I don't know that I'm going to be able to help here, but we've got two readings of all ordinances, as you're familiar with. And by approving an ordinance on first reading, you're not binding yourself to approve it on second reading. On second reading, you can make adjustments, or you can flat out deny it if you're not comfortable. Second reading, which will be July 28th, you could also continue it if you needed to for appropriate reasons. But John, to answer your question also, if the ordinance never came back to the council after first reading, it would die a slow death, and we would never hear of it again, I'm sure. But, so you have a number of options here, but if you don't want to pass it on first reading tonight, then just understand it will take two more council agenda items before you can approve it.
Okay, we're approving to raise the water rates, but we don't know what. Am I?
No, they're up there. They
But-
change.
You're approving the first reading of the ordinance. I mean, I wouldn't take it so far as to say that you're approving to raise the water rates to what's in here. You're just approving first reading of this proposed ordinance.
John's doing this every week.
We do this every week, but we don't ever, I mean, this is the rest of the council in tune with this? Do y'all know what's, can I have a consensus of the council, what's going on? Are y'all all, I know what we're doing, we're making a motion to approve first reading.
Right.
First reading to raise the water rates to this. Unless we decide
Be
later.
adjusted.
Mr. Mayor?
I think I've got them all confused now.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, and I've asked for a second. Councilmember Fowler has his light on.
I don't have a second, but why would we not put this on emergency reading for the next council meeting if that's the case, and then go through the water and sewer fund and see where we're at the workshop, and then read it at emergency reading?
Wayne, is that an option?
Do we have a copy of the charter here? Let's see what qualifies as an emergency reading.
While Wayne's reading that, I really believe that after you've had an opportunity to take a hard look at this fund and have the discussion that's going to be necessary with staff to explore it and understand it fully, I believe in my mind you're going to be far more comfortable with this decision than you are tonight. I mean, I can't really expect you to be comfortable tonight because you haven't seen. You know, the document was just handed to you earlier. The timing is off here, clearly. you know, I wish I could give you some comfort with the first reading, because I know if you are not comfortable after we've had our workshop and you don't want this thing to come back, I will not bring it back. I'll chunk it in the trash. But I'll do it with a very strong recommendation that we're doing the wrong thing, because this is a problem that we have to fix. And that the integrity of that fund is sliding seriously fast. And I think you'll understand that and appreciate that after we've had a chance to go into it. I think you'll also have the same concerns. So there's really nothing lost by first reading tonight. You have absolutely nothing to lose.
Wayne?
It's my opinion that this would not qualify as an emergency for purposes of your charter, and I'll give you a more detailed explanation if you want that.
You want a more detailed explanation? Okay. Councilmember Williams?
Let me ask the attorney one question and we'll move on. If I second this motion, Mr. Attorney, and after we go through the budget process and I'm not happy at all with what I read here, can I come back and make a motion to deny it at the next meeting?
At second reading, yes, you may.
I will make a motion to second this motion to move on.
We have a motion and a second to approve this ordinance listed under item 16. Any discussion on the motion? There being none, if you will register your vote. All right, we've got some who haven't registered. Would you please register your vote? Okay, the motion passes. We're ready now to move on to item number 17. Item number 17 is one that I had placed on the agenda. The council has taken a stance, and we have precedent for taking a look at some of the boards and commissions we have, and those that we feel are not fulfilling a role and providing or not functioning, for those to be disbanded. We've done that within the last year on the Volunteer Services Board and on the Minority Affairs Board, and I had asked us to take a look at the Sexually Oriented License Appeals Board. We have a board of citizens who take a look at the request that someone who might want to put a business like this in might appeal for an exemption based under that. This Sexually Oriented License Appeal Board has never met since 1994. It has never fulfilled any function that I'm aware of. And as the result of that, I had asked that the council give consideration to approving an ordinance amending that original ordinance, which in effect, as you've looked at the board packet, indicates that this board would be, if the council approves this ordinance, would disband this board, and the council would set in its place in the event there was an appeal under the terms of this. Is that assessment, Mr. Attorney, that I have just made descriptive of what we're being asked to consider here tonight?
I was asked to draft this ordinance to allow the city council to fill the role of the sexually oriented business board because of the fact that they had not met. The sole purpose of the board is to grant exemptions from the locational restrictions on where sexually oriented businesses can be. And that is merely a safety valve provision in the ordinance. That way, if some applicant were to consider challenging the city's regulations which prohibit sexually oriented businesses in most places in the city, then they would have the opportunity to come before currently the Sexually Oriented Business Board, or if you approve this ordinance, it'll be the city council and make their pitch to you as to why they think that they have an appropriate location that doesn't meet your distance restrictions. So if you approve this ordinance, the city council would sit in that role anytime an applicant requires or requests that an exemption from the distance restrictions be granted.
Okay, we have two citizens who have asked to speak on this subject. Don Arp, if you'll come forward at this time. And then after, okay, Mr. Eklund, Ray Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Ray Eklund. I live at 2532 Oakwood Terrace. I have a great deal of experience with the ordinance as it sits on our records. 10 years ago, our city was approached by, and Mr. Mayor, I may need more than 5 minutes on this issue. Our city was approached by a sexually oriented business wanting to open up on the airport freeway, and the citizens of this community rose up in arms almost. The council chambers were full. We ended up having to meet at the Birdville Coliseum to accommodate all the persons that were concerned about this issue at that time. And from that beginning, we formed a citizens group, and I'm happy to say they selected me as their leader at that time. And we gathered from across the country different sexually oriented business ordinances. We studied the problems of pornography, sexually oriented businesses, what the law requires, what constitutionally they are allowed, what we are allowed as citizens to do to protect our property and our children and our environment. So, having said that, we worked with the city attorney's office, and out of that came a very hefty ordinance. Okay? 10 years has passed, and I can say with some happiness that we haven't had any applications to have a sexually oriented business in our community. Okay? And part of the reason is because of the ordinance, we would like to think. Right? It makes several requirements of them, and it actually restricts their areas where they can open their businesses. Okay? We spent a great deal of time coming up with those areas that would allow them their constitutional rights, while at the same time protecting our citizens and the property values here in our community. Part of that ordinance was the review board that you're talking about eliminating tonight. I think that is a mistake. That review board is not something that the city council wants to take on. Okay? I think it served its purpose like 2 centuries, 2 Marines out on the front lines. Okay? Yeah, maybe they didn't have to shoot anybody yet. Maybe they didn't have to do anything yet. But I'm sure glad they're out there. So the citizens that are serving on this board, I think they provide us the service in the fact that they haven't had to provide their service yet. This will be political when somebody tries to put one of these businesses in our community. You can rest assured, and I feel confident that the citizens of this community will come down here and visit again with their concerns. All right? To allow exemptions to the law to come before the city council, I think would eliminate a very important separation for the council. Okay, y'all have a lot to do. We see the meetings go on real long. You have a lot of things every week to talk about. Okay, and these will be very detailed discussions about why this business should be there, why it shouldn't be there, and all these things. It's going to be a long, drawn-out thing, and I don't believe that you really want that in the council on the regular agenda meeting. Okay, your packet on item number 17, section 1, part C. I found it on page 2. Talks about exempting these things. Okay, if the political, we've got budget problems. If a sexually oriented business came to our town to apply and said, I can bring you $500,000 in sales tax revenue, I can solve your problems. Okay, all I want is you to exempt the Kmart parking lot. Let me open my business right there. And the city's looking at $1 million in funds. Okay? Well, now you got politics in there. Then you got problems. Okay? These citizens can separate those problems, and they can deal with it separately. And I think that's an important thing to keep in hand. The board, as it sits today, doesn't cost the city anything. It doesn't cause you any problems. You don't even know they're there because obviously they're not me. Okay? It's kind of like a little insurance plan. We all understand insurance. So, you buy it for what it gives you. It gives you some peace of mind. Right? I think we should leave the ordinance as it is. Okay? I know you've been going through to look at the different boards, but this particular board serves a different kind of purpose. Okay? And I would like to ask the city to leave it basically the way it is. Okay? Please don't try to tackle this. You get your packets on Thursday, and on Monday night you have to make intelligent decisions. Okay? Maybe some of you got enough time to do it. Maybe some of you are really cramming hard to get all the information in there. When it comes to sexually oriented businesses and their location, it's going to be a big package. Okay? So I think the citizens deserve more than just a little bit of time on it. And I think the proposal, as I read it this morning, okay, will not offer the protections that we currently have, and I would like to keep the ones that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eklund. Councilmember Williams, and then Councilmember Sutton.
Thank you. I wasn't going to be extreme as Mr. Eklund was about the Marines out there, but I kind of thought it was like the bulldog on the porch. With him being there, nothing's really going to come up. We don't know if the bulldog's going to bite or not, and I think his board has kind of been that way. One of that board's famous brags that they've had for the last 6 years I've been here is they've never met. That's probably good in the essence of times that, my member's been on there ever since I've been on the council, 6 years, 5.5 years, something like that. Never had any problem with my board member, never had her call any complaints or stuff, but I don't know if Mr. Eklund covered it or not. Arlington is cracking down on this. And when you start swatting these flies, they're going to start moving somewhere else, and they're going to go to the place of least resistance. And y'all have already nominated us for another board tonight that we're on. And if we do this, it'll be another board. I'll be appointed to a board twice in one night. That's one I've ever done in Haltom City at one night. So I would rather keep it how it is. Maybe need to restructure or something. It'd be nice if they did have a meeting once a year or something where at least the board members knew each other. But I think with that safety valve in fact there, I don't know if our chief of police have ever met the board members. Never have. So my recommendation would be, if it needs any tweaking at all, just tweak the board and leave it in effect the way it is. And that'd be in line of motion.
Okay, Councilmember Sutton has his light on, and then we'll come back to you for that motion, Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. I served on this board for a year prior to coming on City Council, and just like Councilmember Williams said, and also the Mayor, this board has not met. And so I really question whether or not the board would be effective in addressing the concerns of what an appeal would be and what it would result. I've done some talking to an attorney, and there would be some legal things that we would have to discuss and know about before meeting and before going over that exemption. I think the motion, as I understand it, this proposal as I understand it, actually brings more visibility to a sexual-oriented business coming into the community by bringing it before the council. And I think that is exactly what you want to do in a case like this, is you want to make it as hard and a process that is painful as possible for these businesses to come into this city. Bringing it before the council is bringing it before elected representatives that the voters vote for. And by golly, if we vote wrong on that one, we know what's going to happen in May. Now, I have to ask a question of the attorney here. Is it possible that whenever, since we haven't had one of these requests for 6 years, is it possible that whenever we do have a request in the future, if that should ever happen again, that we could put together a committee, not unlike a charter review committee or something like that by an ordinance that would address that specific request for an exemption at that time?
As long as we're not discussing removing the exemption provision from the ordinance, I would recommend we have an exemption provision in the ordinance, because if we don't, then an applicant who feels that our ordinance is unreasonable could go straight to court without going through us first. I want to make them come through the city of Haltom City before they even have a right to sue for the reason that our ordinance is overly restrictive in their opinion. So this is, again, a safety valve that requires anybody who believes that the locational restrictions are too strict to require them to come before the city and seek an exemption and explain their case before they can go to court to sue us over this. So I would not recommend deleting this provision. I certainly don't have any problems with whichever way you want to go on, whether the city council or the SOB board or some other board performs that function.
Let me make sure I understand you perfectly. What you're saying is adopting this ordinance may put us in more of a legal risk to these?
No, what I'm saying is, and I may have misunderstood you, what I'm saying is I do not want to adopt an ordinance that would repeal the provision that allows someone to apply for an exemption.
Oh, correct, yes, definitely. But what I'm saying is that at the time, if by adopting this proposal, this is not going to put us at risk.
No, there's no greater risk.
And is
by
there
adopting this
a chance
ordinance.
that if this were to come up to the council, that a sexual oriented business wanted to locate here, that we could form a committee at that time to address the exemption? Would we need to do that versus coming before the city council? Do you see what I'm saying?
You're asking whether we should amend this ordinance to provide for the creation of a committee rather than have the city council do it.
No need to amend it at this time. Would that be a possibility in the
No.
future?
Not unless you amend the ordinance to provide for that.
I see. Okay. Okay. That's I appreciate that.
Okay, no one else has their light on. I'm in line for motion regarding item number 17. Councilmember Williams?
I think I made one already, didn't I? Didn't I make a motion to leave it as it was? Recommended?
Motion to
I make a
leave-
motion to recommend leave it like it is, leave the board intact.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Do I have a second? Okay, I'll ask a second time and then a third, and then we'll declare, if no one seconds it, we'll declare the motion ceasing for lack of a second. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second to that motion? Okay, and the third and final time, do we have a second? Okay, there being none, the motion dies for lack of a second. What is the pleasure of the council regarding this item? Councilmember Hurley?
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 02-003-019-01.
We have a motion to approve. Councilmember Sutton?
That's for a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Fowler?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to vote against this because I, like Councilmember Sutton had mentioned, believe that there's a need for a committee to be in between there. I don't know if it was, I guess from clarification standpoint, I don't know if it was better for us to form a committee at the point of someone applying for this licensing, or whether it's, I feel like it's important that we have a buffer between the council and the city, or the council and the citizens, in order to make it a little more lengthy process for someone to go through to be able to apply for licensing. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? There being none, I'll call for the vote at this time. And the motion fails. So the Sexually Oriented Business Board of Appeals Board remains in place as is. Okay, we move now to item number 19. On a quarterly basis, we receive reports from our boards and commissions. You have that in your packet. There's no action required. Any comments by any members of the council on item number 19? There being none, we move to item 20, resignation of board members. Councilmember Williams, I believe you have a resignation.
Yes, sir. I've got a resignation at home. I didn't bring it tonight, but it's from Dr. Chapman, serving on the Fire Service Board. He's been a faithful member of that board. He is taking on a task of being a chairman on a committee at his church. It's going to require quite a bit of time. And he gives his regrets that he has to resign from this board, but he's going to have to dedicate quite a bit of his time toward his church. So I want to thank Mr. Chapman for his time that he's dedicated to us.
Okay, you have heard Councilmember Williams' statement of resignation of Dr. Chapman. If you will, vote regarding your wishes on ratification. And that passes by unanimous vote. Any other resignation of board members? Okay, we move then to appointments and reappointments. Councilmember Hurley.
Mayor, I've got a change in the recommendation of positions at large. For the Animal Advisory Board, substitute Dr. G.J. Moss, M-A-S, DVM.
Okay, you have heard the recommendation of Councilmember Hurley. If you will, indicate your wishes for ratification. And that passes by unanimous vote. Item 22 is the attendance requirement regarding excused absence of council members. Councilmember Averett is not with us tonight. We need to take some action regarding that. Councilmember Williams.
As I talked to Mr. Averett later this afternoon, and he's ill, couldn't be here, so I'll make a motion to excuse his absence.
Okay, Councilmember Fowler.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second to excuse that absence. If you will, indicate your vote, and that passes unanimously. We've addressed all items on the agenda. We move now into executive session pursuant to section 551.071 and .072, and we'll reconvene in regular session to take action on any items that need to be brought forth at that time. Two more bodies. One more body.
Diane, that's 4.
5.
5.
Gotta have 5.
Here comes 2. Here.
Are you ready? The council is reconvened in open session. There was no action to be taken on any item discussed in executive session. That being the case, we stand adjourned.